Hello there, my name is Alyssa Nathan, and I have been teaching social studies for 6 years now. 5 of them have been spent in the 7th grade classroom. So that was the inspiration for my unit plan. I have found that students struggle in 7th grade originally when they get there because they're not connected with the ancient world cultures. Perhaps it just doesn't interest them, or they fail to see the connection to our world today. So I decided to examine primary sources from Mesopotamia to try to bring it alive. So for the overview, students will examine primary sources from Mesopotamia. During their examination, they will think about these items and how they would be displayed in museums or why they would have been saved. So the ultimate goal is to think about why the items that are displayed and why the ones that are saved are the ones chosen. So after their examination, they will create a list of items someone in the future would use to create an exhibit on our life in the 21st century. So of course, this is for 7th grade. And here in the unit plan itself, we'll list out the social studies standards, the C3 indicators, the disciplinary literacy essential practices, etc. So you can take the time to read that beforehand. This brings me to my compelling questions. As museums collect artifacts from ancient cultures, which items are collected and why? How do these artifacts shape what we perceive about these cultures? And then I have 3 supporting questions. The first one, what is a primary source? And why should we analyze them as we study ancient cultures? So my first question was brought about because I noticed through my years of experience that many students, by the time they get to me, do not know what a primary or a secondary source is. So I usually spend some time introducing them to primary and secondary sources and doing some activities. The second question, what do the artifacts displayed tell you about life in ancient Mesopotamia? And the third question, after your analysis, how does life in ancient Mesopotamia relate to our lives here in the 21st century? All right, so going to lesson 1. I will say if you are someone who has already gone over primary and secondary sources, you may want to use this as a review. If you feel your students are ready, you can continue to lesson number 2. Okay, so what is going to happen? Students will complete something called a word splash. Now, a word splash is where a student is presented with a term that they are unfamiliar with, and they attempt to define it. So students will be presented with the terms primary and secondary sources. Now, I usually give them about a minute for each term to define them on their own on a sheet of paper, writing down their thoughts of what each one may mean. After that time is up, I have them turn to an elbow partner or someone they're working with, and they share their thoughts on what they wrote. Afterwards, I have a whole group discussion where I have students share out their answers, and we talk about misconceptions, and I show them the actual definitions of the terms. The next part of the lesson would have those who are unfamiliar show their students this video. I'm not going to have you watch it, but it is linked here. Now, as you are watching the video, you may want to pause at various intervals just to allow students to complete the questions because there are questions embedded. Once completing the questions, have the students take the quiz. Now, I have found that it's beneficial to pause the video and discuss the students' thoughts before showing the answer, and then pause again after the answer if they are seeming like they don't understand, just to address any misconceptions. Now, the third activity is from the George W. Bush Presidential Library. It is, like I said, optional if you feel your students are ready to move on. It's going to involve them having 6 scenarios to read and deciding whether the scenario is a primary source or a secondary source. And a link to where to find the activity is right here. So if you click it, you will be transported to the website to download the activity, which I'm going to show you now. Now, once here, you will have to scroll all the way to the bottom, but there are some useful things in the web page itself if you want to check them out on your own time. But come all the way down here and you will be clicking right here and it will lead you to a download, which will pop up in another tab. We will be focusing on page number 7 and 8. So there are more activities in here if you feel your students want or need more practice. So definitely, if you're going to print these out for them, make sure you print in black and white because they are um, colored by what the answer is. So you wouldn't want to give them that necessarily because they'd pick up on it. What I've done in the past is taking the time to cut these out and put them in envelopes and almost made it like a mission and themed it that way. You don't have to. You could simply just give them the 6 scenarios on a sheet of paper. So once again, this is completely optional, but I have found students have really appreciated it in the past. All right, after completing the primary source scenarios activity, for independent practice, I encourage that you assign students this primary and secondary sources practice assignment. If you click this link, it will force a copy of a Google Doc. In that Google Doc, they will have 5 examples and they will have to determine whether it is a primary or secondary source. And then they will have a final part of the assignment, which requires them to read a longer source and determine whether it is a primary or a secondary source. They need to give specific text-based evidence to support their claim. So this brings us to lesson number 2, Life in Mesopotamia based on primary sources. If your students are very familiar with Mesopotamia, you could skip this video, but if not, feel free to have them watch it and jot down some important innovations and inventions created by Mesopotamians and explain how they impact our everyday lives now. The next thing that would be a part of this lesson would be the Mesopotamia assignment. So if you click here, you would complete steps 2 and 3 in this document. It will force you to make a copy. So the students are going to complete an activity. I recommend that they are in pairs or small groups to help facilitate discussion. They will talk about what they see, think, and wonder about the artifacts that are displayed for them. So that first part, they will be given a picture of a artifact and they will have to discuss what they think it is without any context besides what is in the picture. I recommend discussing after they have completed that part of the activity, their thoughts and what they think each item is. Now, after that, they will return to their small pairs or their small groups or pairs in order to complete the next part. Now, with this activity, if you do not have access to technology or student laptops, you can print all of this out in paper copy. But if you do have access to technology for them, I do recommend them visiting the website that's attached to each artifact, which I will show you in just a moment. All right, so this is the document I was referring to. So as you can see, this is the first part for part 1. And they would just be given the picture of an artifact and expected to talk about what they see, what they think, and what they wonder. So they'll go through that process with all the artifacts that are listed, all 4. And then after you went over their answers with them, they would move on to part 2. It shows them the same artifact, but it gives them information on the artifact that is presented, like what it is, the background information, etc., and what museum it's currently in. Now, if you have technology, they could click this link and be taken directly to the Google Arts and Culture page where they can see it and they can blow up the image. Once they've done that, they would talk about how this artifact relates to items like it today and how it is similar or different from our items today. So they would complete this and then move on to the formative or summative assessment for this unit using the same links you would give them. You would allow them to choose their own item and to complete the same process that they have completed in step 3. Now, if you do not have students that have access to technology, you could pick a few artifacts on your own and assign them by printing them out. But they are going to focus on answering these 3 questions. So, where is the artifact currently? Is it where you think it should be, and explain? Why was the artifact saved in quotation marks? So why is it currently here? Is it something you feel should be in a museum? And then for number 3, reflecting on the location of the artifact currently. Do you think it should be somewhere else? If so, explain your reasoning. And this wraps up lesson 2. Moving to lesson 3, how did life in Mesopotamia relate to our lives? So for this one, we're going to have students for the first task reflect and write down what our world would be like without laws. So in the reflection, you would have them think about if laws are really an essential part of our world. And once they have finished their reflection, you can have them share with a partner and then have a whole class discussion. I do recommend watching this video. It is on Hammurabi's Code, just giving some background because the next activity will involve the analysis of Hammurabi's Code. So step 3 is going to be in small groups, and they're going to analyze different parts of Hammurabi's Code. So they'll be given a situation and asked to give their thoughts on what a fair punishment would be. And their goal would be determine what the law and punishments are, express their feelings on the punishment, and determine what a more suitable punishment should be if they think one is needed. So you have a few things here. You have a copy of the actual code. So if you wanted to show them a translation of the Code of Hammurabi, you could click here. If you wanted to show them an image of the primary source, there is an image here. And then finally, the assignment is posted here. So if you take the time to click it, you will force a copy and you will see the scenarios listed out. I'll go through that right now. Okay, so the directions for each of the situations, they need to follow this 3-step process. So first, read each situation and then record their idea of what the law should be. Step 2, read what actually is said in Hammurabi's Code and apply it to the situation, and then write down their reaction. Do you think it is fair, too lenient, too harsh? You're going to decide and you're going to explain your answer. So they would read the situation, they would answer it, and then they'd look and see what the code says and go from there answering those questions. So they'll complete all the situations listed. All right, the formative assessment task would be, in a short essay, students will answer the following questions. In what ways do you see evidence of the punishments from Hammurabi's Code in our own legal system? Discuss at least 2 of the 6 situations and make a connection from Hammurabi's Code to the present. Support your answer with evidence from the code as well as a current event or story. You can always take out this last part if you feel that is too advanced for your students, but definitely try to focus on having them apply evidence from the code in their answer. Now, the summative assessment is going to be a video project. So for the project, they will answer the following questions. If someone in the future was creating a museum exhibit on our life in the 21st century, which items do you think they would include and why? Looking at our laws, which law or laws do you think they feel are similar to Hammurabi's Code? The students need to include 3 to 5 items and at least 1 example of a law. Now, this project could be completed in Zoom, Flipgrid, or another platform that they feel will work for this assignment, and they will need to create a script that will go with the video to be presented. Now, the suggested length of the video is between 5 to 10 minutes. You could always tweak this. The student should include visual aids in order to help the viewer understand the items being discussed. For the visual aid, they may use something like Google Slides or PowerPoint that is displayed as they go. And of course, creativity is encouraged. Sliding down, there is a short rubric. You may want to add criteria just depending on how you tweak the assignment. And then you have a list of the sources used here. So if you wanted more depth on where I've got some of this information, that would be where you would go. So thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoy the unit. I'm wishing everybody a wonderful day. Thank you.